They called him O Animal, not because he lacked skill, but because he felt too much. He played like a storm breaking over summer asphalt, hot, reckless, irresistible, then left the street cracked behind him. On one night that still lives in Brazilian football folklore, he celebrated his birthday with a chimp and a tiger, as if Rio were his private circus and the world owed him an ovation. The tabloids swore he laughed with the animals, that the champagne and the flashbulbs made a palace out of the night, that a genius can turn even a zoo into a stadium. Later, they swore he offered the chimp a drink. Later, they swore a lot of things. Rumor was the only currency big enough for Edmundo. What was never rumor was the way he tore at defenders, hips fighting, eyes blazing, the shot like a door slammed in a silent room. At Palmeiras, he felt like a promise. At Vasco, he became a prophecy fulfilled. At Fiorentina, he was the bright flare that made a title chase look possible, until Carnival called his name louder than Europe did. He danced when Florence needed discipline. He vanished when a calmer man would have stayed. And every choice he made felt like a duel with himself. There is another night people whisper about, a road, a spin of metal, a life that turned into headlines and courtrooms. There are teammates who loved him and managers who feared the chaos that walked into training beside the talent. And there is a country, Brazil, that can forgive almost anything except wasting a gift that could have fed an entire generation's belief. He fought the world. He fought the press, the coaches, the contracts, the curfews, and then, more fatally, he fought himself. This is not a neat biography. This is a crime scene of miracles and mistakes. Brazil in the 1990s was a country balancing between ecstasy and exhaustion. The yellow shirt still glittered with Pelé's ghost, Zico's elegance, and Romario's swagger. Yet beneath the glow lay a football culture soaked in contradictions, joy and poverty, artistry and violence, discipline and chaos. Stadiums shook with samba rhythms, while streets outside cracked with inequality. For every boy who dreamt of Maracanã glory, there was a reminder that talent alone wasn't enough. You had to survive your own city first. Edmundo Alves de Souza Neto, born in Niterói in 1971, carried this paradox in his very body. He was small but explosive, with the sharp features of a street fighter and eyes that always looked like they were arguing with someone. To the youth of Rio's neighborhoods, he was proof that genius could grow in rough soil, a player who turned futsal's compressed energy into 90 minutes of volcanic football. To the old guard, he was both hope and warning, a boy too wild to be tamed, too brilliant to be ignored. His nickname, O Animal, wasn't a cheap insult. It was a badge of honor and shame all at once. Brazilian commentators coined it after watching him tear through defenses with a fury that seemed more beast than man. When he dribbled, defenders lost balance, not just on the pitch, but in their minds. They couldn't predict him, because half the time, he didn't predict himself. He played as if improvisation were his only religion. But the same energy that made him unplayable made him unstable. Brazil in that era loved its rebels. Renato Gaúcho, Romario, Bebeto all had stories of nightlife and chaos. But Edmundo pushed the line further. He seemed to believe the myth of the street footballer so deeply that he tried to live it 24 hours a day. Party by night, predator by day, Edmundo became a lightning rod for a country that adored both scandal and salvation. The era amplified him. Television was hungry for characters, tabloids hunted for scandals, and every misstep became headline fodder. Brazil was becoming a nation that sold its stars as much as it celebrated them. Romario might skip training and still be forgiven if he scored at the weekend, but Edmundo didn't have Romario's charisma or political skills. He had something rawer, darker, more dangerous. He was the kid who wouldn't bow, even when bowing might have saved him. By the mid-90s, as Brazil reclaimed its throne at the 1994 World Cup and prepared to unveil Ronaldo, the fenomeno, to the world, Edmundo was carving his own myth in parallel. He was too good to ignore, too problematic to fully embrace. To the romantics, he was the last street poet of Brazilian football. To the critics, he was a ticking bomb waiting to detonate. And to himself, he was always both. Edmundo's rise was not gentle. It was volcanic. At Vasco da Gama, the club that carried the working-class soul of Rio, he burst into the first team like a street fight no one could break up. His goals weren't just finishes, they were declarations. He played as if he had been wronged by the world, and every defender represented that injustice. The crowd loved him for it. To Vasco fans, Edmundo was not merely a forward. He was a banner of defiance, the embodiment of the club's scrappy pride. Then came Palmeiras. In the mid-90s, bankrolled by Parmalat, Palmeiras were building a dynasty, and Edmundo became their wild crown jewel. In the green shirt, he sharpened his talent into something lethal: league titles, decisive goals, and moments of brilliance that made São Paulo's packed stadiums feel like theaters of improvisation. He partnered with fellow stars, Roberto Carlos, Rivaldo, Cafu, yet even among such company, Edmundo's fire was unmistakable. In 1997, he returned to Vasco and authored the season of his life. 34 goals in the Brasileirão, a record at the time, as Vasco stormed to the title. He was the league's top scorer, the idol of São Januário, and the tormentor of every rival. Newspapers called it the Year of the Animal. At his peak, he was not merely unstoppable, he was uncontainable. Europe, inevitably, came calling. Fiorentina signed him in 1997, pairing him with Gabriel Batistuta in what promised to be one of Serie A's most fearsome attacks. For a while, it worked. Edmundo's dribbles electrified Florence. His goals roared through the Curva Fiesole, and fans dared to dream of a Scudetto. With Batistuta injured, Edmundo even carried the team alone, proving his talent was world-class. But triumph always came chained to turbulence. When Fiorentina fought for the title, Edmundo left mid-season, flying home for Carnival, the one festival louder than any coach's orders. For Brazilians, it was a scandal that confirmed every stereotype. For Italians, it was betrayal. Yet in Edmundo's mind, life could not be postponed, not even for glory. Still, his legacy of triumphs is undeniable. A Copa America winner in 1997 with Brazil, a top scorer, a champion, a striker who bent matches to his will. For every reckless act, there was a night when only he could deliver. For every scandal, a goal that silenced even the harshest critic. At his best, Edmundo was proof that genius does not have to be clean to be beautiful. But beauty in his case was always fleeting. Do you want me to continue with Part 4, Scandals and Dark Side? Part 4, Scandals and Dark Side. For every goal Edmundo scored, there seemed to be a headline waiting with claws out. His genius was undeniable, but his volatility made him just as famous off the pitch as on it. Brazil, a nation that thrives on myth-making, didn't need to invent much. Edmundo supplied his own chaos. The most infamous scandal came not from a stadium, but from his 26th birthday party. Journalists reported that alongside the music and champagne, Edmundo invited a chimpanzee and a tiger to entertain guests. One rumor claimed he handed the chimp alcohol. Another said the tiger nearly slipped free. Whether exaggerated or not, the story cemented his image. Football's enfant terrible, a man who lived without boundaries. To the tabloids, he was a carnival act disguised as a striker. To his clubs, he was a PR disaster waiting to erupt. Then there was the tragedy. In 1995, after celebrating with friends, Edmundo was involved in a car accident that killed 3 people. Though he denied being drunk, the case shadowed him for years. Courtrooms, appeals, a suspended prison sentence that only deepened his reputation as reckless and untouchable. Some saw him as a victim of fame's magnifying glass. Others as proof that arrogance and negligence had consequences no dribble could erase. Even within football, he fought battles that scorched bridges. At Palmeiras, he clashed with coach Vanderlei Luxemburgo and teammates alike. At Vasco, he quarreled with Romario, 2 egos too large to share one city. At Fiorentina, his refusal to prioritize football over carnival became legend for all the wrong reasons. Clubs adored his goals but dreaded his shadow. And yet, the scandals were strangely inseparable from his genius. Edmundo lived in extremes. If he loved, it was violently. If he rebelled, it was openly. If he failed, it was spectacularly. He seemed to crave chaos as much as applause, as if normal life couldn't sustain the fire inside him. In a country where Pelé was sainted and Ronaldo crowned fenomeno, Edmundo stood as the dark twin, a reminder that talent without control can devour itself. Fans didn't just watch his matches, they waited for the explosion afterward. Every scandal leaves scars, and for Edmundo, those scars eventually weighed more than the goals he scored. By the late 1990s, when Brazil was fielding Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and an entire constellation of disciplined stars, Edmundo's flame burned more like a warning than a light. The 1998 World Cup should have been his redemption. With Ronaldo struggling through the infamous final in Paris, many wondered if Edmundo might rise to the occasion. He was on the pitch, but his chance never came. Brazil collapsed 3-0 to France, and Edmundo's name became another footnote in a night of national trauma. For a man who had fought his whole life for the spotlight, being overshadowed by Ronaldo's tragedy was its own cruel punishment. At club level, his volatility made him a wanderer. Vasco, Palmeiras, Corinthians, Santos, Cruzeiro. He wore the shirts of Brazil's giants, yet always departed with conflict at his back. Abroad, Fiorentina soured, and later Napoli offered only fleeting sparks. Coaches called him unmanageable. Directors called him unreliable. By the early 2000s, Edmundo's career had become a carousel of transfers, each ride shorter and less glorious than the last. The court case from the 1995 accident haunted him relentlessly. Appeals, retrials, headlines that never let him forget. Even when he scored, reporters asked about judges. Even when he played, fans whispered about the dead. To some, he was a criminal in boots. To others, a martyr of his own excess. In truth, he was both. An athlete who carried tragedy as heavily as talent. Financial troubles followed, as they so often do for stars who live too fast. Lavish parties, legal bills, broken contracts, the money evaporated as quickly as it came. The man who once ruled Rio with a ball and a glare now struggled with debts and lawsuits. By the time he edged toward retirement, Edmundo felt less like a gladiator than a fugitive from his own legend. Collapse did not come in one dramatic moment. It came in fragments: missed trainings, lost contracts, teammates who stopped trusting, managers who stopped believing. It came every time the word animal was used, not to praise his ferocity, but to mock his lack of control. In the end, he had fought everyone: clubs, coaches, teammates, journalists, and lost to the only opponent he couldn't outrun: himself. Edmundo's story refuses to fit neatly into either glory or disgrace. He was too brilliant to be dismissed, too volatile to be fully embraced. For some, he remains one of the most electrifying forwards Brazil ever produced. A man who could summon magic from a standing start, who carried Vasco to a national title almost single-handedly, who on his best days looked as dangerous as Romario, as fearless as Ronaldo. For others, he is the symbol of wasted talent, the cautionary tale of how genius without discipline corrodes itself. In retirement, Edmundo reinvented himself as a TV pundit. Behind the microphone, he showed flashes of the same fire, opinionated, sharp, unafraid of controversy. In some ways, it was the perfect stage. Football still needed his voice, but no longer suffered his chaos. He became, almost ironically, a critic of modern players' lack of focus. A man who knew better than anyone what it cost to squander opportunity. Fans remain divided. Vasco supporters still chant his name, remembering the season when O Animal devoured every defense in Brazil. Fiorentina fans recall both his goals and his carnival betrayal. For Palmeiras, he is forever both champion and rebel. And in the wider history of Brazilian football, he is an outlier, a star who never became a global icon, not because he lacked talent, but because he refused to surrender his life to the game. Perhaps that is the most human part of his legend. Edmundo never pretended to be perfect, never polished his image to fit a sponsor's brochure. He lived loudly, made mistakes in public, and carried the consequences in full view. Where Pelé became a saint and Ronaldo a superhero, Edmundo remained something rawer, a man. He fought the world and lost to himself. The phrase is both epitaph and mirror. His career is a reminder that genius in football is not just about what happens with the ball at your feet. It's about the battles you fight within. Edmundo's talent made him unforgettable. His flaws made him tragic. And together, they made him a legend. Brazil will never quite agree on, but will never forget.